Tonight, all options remain on the table with Iran. The escalating tension and what it means for the rest of the Middle East. And lawmakers take on immigration, while the White House says it will veto a new plan from the House. Plus, government agencies at risk of cyber attacks, the new warning, and what needs to be done to protect Americans. All that and more tonight on Faith Nation.
President Trump issues a new warning to Iran. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. In the latest back and forth with the Iranian regime, President Trump is threatening, quote, great and overwhelming force if Iran attacks anything American.
This after the Iranian president rejected an offer to meet, calling new sanctions against his country outrageous and idiotic. CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us with more on where the volatile situation stands. Ben?
Well, John and Jenna, word from Iran as these latest sanctions mean the permanent closure of diplomacy. Trump accuses Iran's supreme leader and others of fueling and of funding terror, which is why these sanctions specifically target them.
Words are the weapons between the U.S. and Iran after President Trump hit the regime with a new round of economic sanctions.
What America's doing today is a sign of its definite failure. There is an unusual frustration in the administration and the White House, a total confusion. The White House is afflicted by mental retardation and does not know what to do.
President Trump responded, tweeting, Iran leadership doesn't understand the words nice or compassion. They never have. Iran's very ignorant and insulting statement put out today only shows that they do not understand reality. Any attack by Iran on anything American will be met with great and overwhelming force. In some areas, overwhelming will mean obliteration. Even with this strong threat, a new poll shows most voters back Trump's decision not to strike Iran after they shot down an American drone.
Do you have an exit strategy for Iran if war does break out?
You're not going to need an exit strategy.
National Security Advisor John Bolton says that restraint should not be confused with weakness, adding that in order to prevent nuclear weapons in Iran, all options are on the table.
All of this means that the threat of a nuclear Iran is very real, as are the threats of Iran's support for terrorism, its ballistic missile program, and its other malign activities in the Middle East.
Now, Bolton calls Iran the main problem in the region. The White House says the reason behind these sanctions were to push Iran back to negotiations. But as you just heard from the leaders of Iran, it appears that will not happen. John?
Well, Ben, thanks for that report. With talk of possible U.S. military action against Iran, some are concerned Israel might be dragged into the conflict. As CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell explains, Hezbollah, one of Israel's biggest threats, gets its money and marching orders from Iran.
Looking at these peaceful hills, it's hard to imagine a well-armed enemy is hidden and possibly waiting to strike.
The fact that Hezbollah is involved in every aspect of life of the people in those towns on the other side of the border enables it to deploy such a huge and massive military infrastructure in South Lebanon.
We're standing on the Israeli-Lebanese border. Just on the other side, you can see the yellow Hezbollah flags flying. The IDF estimates that Hezbollah has hidden well over 100,000 rockets in these towns and villages in southern Lebanon.
All of them comfortably hidden behind Lebanese civilians inside Lebanon.
IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conriquez says that plays into Hezbollah's hands.
And the aim of Hezbollah is to be able to have those rockets, fire them at Iranian orders at our civilians, and then once we retaliate, that would cause collateral damage, and they would then try to use that for their advantage.
During fighting in 2006, Hezbollah launched some 4,000 rockets at northern Israeli cities. Now, most of Israel is in range of its rockets.
Hezbollah is still more armed than many European armies today.
And it's financed by Iran.
Iranian money has facilitated this, as well as many other hostile, aggressive endeavors that Hezbollah has, whether it is the vast rocket arsenal that Hezbollah has, whether it is trying to convert rockets into accurate missiles, or the tunnel project.
CBN News recently got a rare look inside the sixth and largest tunnel Israel has uncovered along its border with Lebanon. You're looking at the equivalent of a 22-story building underground. Had it not been discovered, hundreds of armed Hezbollah fighters could have filled the tunnel, waiting to attack, kidnap, and kill Israelis. Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi says there's always a possibility of war.
I think it depends on how much pressure will be put on Iran and Hezbollah. It depends, like the leader of Hezbollah said, that if there will be war between Iran and United States, Israel and Saudi Arabia will be attacked.
So will there be a war with Hezbollah?
We sure aren't looking for one. But at the end of the day, if the Iranians order Hezbollah to attack Israel, they will be met with a very firm and strong and a painful response by the IDF.
For now, Israel and the rest of the Middle East wait to see whether U.S.-Iranian tensions grow or dissipate. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Lebanese border.
Well, to the battle over immigration, Mexico is sending troops to the southern border to help the U.S. as it faces a surge in migrants from Central America. About 15,000 military and National Guard units are being deployed. This is the first time the Mexican government has announced troops being placed at the border with the U.S. It comes after President Trump threatened Mexico with tariffs. And up on Capitol Hill, lawmakers are fighting over border funding. The House today voting on a bill to provide more than $4.5 billion for things like humanitarian aid. Abigail Robertson joins us now from the Hill. And Abigail, this vote comes as we see these reports about the terrible conditions at some of these holding facilities.
That's right, Jenna. We are hearing reports of just awful conditions, lack of access to basic hygiene items like toothbrushes and soap, flu and lice outbreaks going untreated, children sleeping on floors, and to make matters worse, the agencies that are dealing with these issues are about to run out of money next week. So almost 2 months ago, the White House sent a request to the Hill for emergency funding to handle this situation, and House Republicans introduced a bill that would fund the humanitarian crisis, also some of the security concerns that the White House requested at the southern border. Now that House Republican bill has been voted down 17 times in the House, but Democrats now are recognizing this humanitarian crisis and have introduced their own bill to tackle the situation. Take a look at what Democrat leadership has to say.
There are children who are being held in unspeakable conditions. These are God's children. These are children who are being held without adequate food. These are children who are being held without adequate medicine. There is no soap. There is no diapers. Above all else, there is no human decency. It's something that we need to address, and address with the fierce urgency of now.
Now, with funds about to run out, both sides are trying to get some bill passed, but each in the House are accusing each other of adding poison pills to the respective bills. Here's the GOP leadership's response to the situation.
The Democrats have refused to vote for the bill Mr. Rogers has, which would provide humanitarian assistance for what's happening at the border. We continue to watch, even just over the last 24 hours, that they would rather play politics, that they would rather launch political attacks than actually do something to help those children at the border.
Now, there is hope with a bipartisan bill that's here in the Senate, but the twist is going to be getting it passed in the House as well and signed by the president.
Abby, where does the White House stand on this House plan?
Well, the White House to veto the House Democrat bill. They're accusing House Democrats of throwing in provisions like preventing ICE agents from receiving overtime. They're also saying that their bill prevents DOD resources from going down to help the Customs and Border Patrol. So they don't like this bill, and Republicans are not going to support it. And the president says he won't sign the current bill that House Democrats have proposed.
And what about the Senate? Where is it on its immigration measure?
Well, the Senate bill passed an appropriations subcommittee by a vote of 31 last week. So while neither side say that the bill is perfect, it at least can pass the Senate. And they both leadership today in press conferences said that at the end of the day, they want something that can get passed, be signed by the president, and get these kids the humanitarian aid that they so desperately need at the southern border.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Abigail Robertson for us on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Experience. That is the quality Democrats want most when it comes to their eventual 2020 presidential nominee. An Associated Press NORC poll finds nearly 3/4 of registered Democratic voters, that's 73%, say experience is what excites them most when it comes to supporting a candidate over gender, race, age, or any other consideration. Well, President Trump is casting doubt on Joe Biden, questioning why the candidate and former VP to President Barack Obama didn't get his endorsement. In a Hill TV exclusive, he described the Democratic frontrunner as embarrassed and mentally off. Trump also accused Biden of lying.
How he doesn't get President Obama to endorse him, there has to be some reason why he's not endorsing him. He was a vice president. They seem to have gotten along. And how President Obama is not endorsing him is rather a big secret. And then he goes and lies and said, I asked the president not to endorse me. Give me a break.
And you saw the president talking there with Sagar and Jetty, chief Washington correspondent at The Hill. And Sagar joins us now. Sagar, first of all, great get.
Thank you for having me.
Sagar, let's start with that video. You asked the president about the DNC debates. He answered by talking about ratings and then pivoting to Joe Biden. What's your sense? How threatened is he by Joe Biden as a candidate?
I don't think it's necessarily about threatening, because there's a current narrative here in Washington where people say, oh, the president is elevating Joe Biden by attacking him. But that's not necessarily true. Before he was even attacking him, he was already rising #1 in the polls. The president looks at the race and he says, yes, Elizabeth Warren and some of these other people may be rising, but at the same time, he has to deal with the hand that he's dealt. He believes that's Joe Biden, and that's the person that he's talking about.
On the issue of Iran, you guys made some headlines with this and the timeline of that would-be strike. We're just talking about how comfortable the president seems with you. I know this is your 4th interview with him.
Yeah, that's right.
Just this year. Yeah, he just seemed so comfortable answering very openly a lot of these questions.
I was happy to make him feel comfortable, and I think the key is that I'm not going to interrupt him, and I'm not going to try. I think there's a lot of gotcha games and live fact-checking that people try and play. The truth is that when you interview somebody, your job is to extract information. Your job, let the fact-checkers do the fact-checking job, unless it's particularly egregious, if it's an outright lie. In this particular case, I was like, Mr. President, what was the timeline with the strike? Because it's very confusing. Right. What he told us was that he did not have the death toll estimate in the initial time whenever a strike was being considered, and it was only until later in the stages that a strike was considered.
Sagar, I want to ask you, today we learned the acting commissioner of Customs and Border Patrol is planning to step down amid the outrage of the conditions at the border detention centers. What did the president have to tell you about those conditions?
So the president told us that he does not find that those conditions acceptable. He said, no, I do believe that they should have access to toiletries, but he's also placing a lot of the blame on Democrats, because so much of this is a result of the asylum laws and the system that we have in place right now. As it currently is constituted, the U.S. has to take custody of so many of these unaccompanied children. They have to care for them. But in the meantime, we have to be able to the Border Patrol has to turn them over to Health and Human Services. And it's these children being held in Border Patrol facilities, which were built for adults to be held for 1 or 2 days max, for multiple days at a time. It's just breaking the entire system down.
I thought what was interesting, the president had some surprisingly nice things to say about Merrick Garland.
Yes.
Merrick Garland, whom President Obama nominated to be on the Supreme Court, but was blocked by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who at the time said the American people deserve a voice in the selection process, since that seat came up during the middle of the campaign. Did the president answer the question you guys intended?
So he did, actually. And so this was one of the difficult parts. Half of this was on camera, half of it was off. But during the on-camera section, we asked him, would you nominate somebody between now and Election Day? He said yes. Later on in the print section, we actually asked him to clarify a bit on that timeline, and if he thought it was hypocritical, given his support for Merrick Garland's lack of confirmation. He said, even if it was 3 days before the election, I would nominate somebody. And he's like, because as long as the presidency and the Senate are controlled by the same party, it's not the same situation. Right?
News today, the White House, they named a new press secretary, Stephanie Grisham. You worked as a White House correspondent at one point. Your thoughts on this decision?
Oh, Stephanie is really great to work with. She's worked with the First Lady's office for almost 2 years. She's a fierce defender of Melania Trump, and a lot of people don't actually know this, but I think she has spent the most amount of time with the Trump, the family, or the Trump campaign, and in the White House than Dan Scavino, who's one of the communications directors at the White House. So she has earned his rock-solid trust. That's something that matters to the president more than anything.
All right,
Yeah.
Sagar and Jetty with The Hill, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Keeping America safe from cyber attacks. Why a new investigation says leading government agencies aren't doing enough. That story when we come back.
A disturbing new report shows personal information can be jeopardized by government system failures.
The findings show everyday Americans put at risk by various U.S. agencies, and some issues stretch back more than a decade. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips joins us with the details. Eric?
John and Jenna, we're talking about agencies like Homeland Security, Social Security, and the Education Department, all with holes in cyber protection that could allow a hacker to wreak havoc on millions of Americans. The report exposes how 8 agencies failed to address cyber weaknesses identified by the Inspector General more than a decade ago. The Social Security Administration alone risked the information of more than 60 million Americans who receive benefits. The report revealed that since 2011, the Education Department has been unable to prevent unauthorized devices from connecting to its network, giving hackers 90 seconds to access information. More than enough time for someone who knows what they're doing.
It's critical for Washington to really clean up its own house.
Trevor Logan is a cyber expert with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
It's a huge attack vector that we're leaving ourselves vulnerable to for an adversary to respond.
His concerns echoed by Don Murdoch with the Institute for Cybersecurity at Regent University in Virginia. Murdoch trains people in government and private companies to become cyber defenders, those who can recognize system vulnerabilities, expose a cyber attack, and stop it. He says the threat is real and growing.
If you look at what's occurring globally, there are over 300 well-identified attack groups that have names or numbers that we know about that are operated by foreign service.
With ongoing tensions in the Middle East, officials believe Iran is ratcheting up the cyber attack strategy, even using so-called cyber proxies against the U.S. Other likely countries include China and Russia. There are several recommendations to strengthen the cybersecurity of these government agencies. They include giving chief information officers greater authority over decision-making when it comes to cybersecurity. Those officials would also be required to regularly report their progress to agency heads and ultimately to Congress. John and Jenna.
All right, thank you, Eric. Well, coming up, the struggle to find affordable housing takes center stage, how the Trump administration is working on the issue, and how Democratic presidential candidates say they plan to do more.
Welcome back. As the 2020 campaign looms, the Trump administration is tackling a number of key issues among voters.
Yeah, one big concern, the price of housing. Today, President Trump unveiled a new initiative to study rising costs, and as CBN's Amber Strong shows us, he's not the only one pursuing a plan.
From 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to the campaign trail, 2020 candidates are looking for ways to make housing more affordable. Tuesday, the president signed an executive order establishing a council dedicated to cutting through bureaucratic red tape that keeps developers from producing affordable housing. It's one way the White House will lean into the root of the housing crisis. Last month, the administration faced criticism from both sides for trying to cut money for programs that help low-income recipients.
We have a very substantial affordable housing crisis, and there are 2 ways to approach it. Continue to throw money at it, which has been done for a long time without solving the problem, or ask yourself, why do you have that problem of escalating prices?
When it comes to the cost of housing, local politicians have been sounding an alarm for years.
Rent, it's too
According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, a family with one full-time worker earning minimum wage cannot afford the local fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment anywhere in the U.S. Several Democrats running for president also see the housing issue as an opportunity.
So this is the first community to take a chance on me. Let's walk up the hill here.
New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, who still lives in a low-income community, would offer a tax credit for renters who face spending 30% or more of their income on housing. And former HUD Secretary Julian Castro wants to combat homelessness.
I was one of those Americans that grew up in a family that was struggling, that knows what it's like to wonder if we're going to be able to pay the rent.
His plan expands the Housing Choice Voucher program and supports organizations that flip vacant federal properties into communities for the homeless. While this is just one of the many initiatives coming down the pike ahead of 2020, it certainly affects millions. You can expect more of these kitchen table issues as we inch closer to the primary states and Iowa. Amber Strong, CBN News in Washington.
Thanks, Amber. When we come back, we'll look at the amazing lengths one soldier went on the battlefield to become the first living Iraq War veteran to be awarded the Medal of Honor. An Army staff sergeant who put his own life at risk to save members of his squad is the latest recipient of the Medal of Honor.
David Bellavia is the first living Iraq War veteran to receive the honor. And instead of using the occasion to spotlight himself, he's reflecting on those who served on the ground.
As awkward as this process is to be singled out, I just want to say how absolutely grateful I am that attention can be given to the men and women of 2-2 Infantry, 3rd Brigade, 1st ID. It's really not enough that we honor the fact that we lost people at war for this country, but to acknowledge how they died and why they died. They died for us.
2004, Bellavia stepped in the line of fire to help his squad escape a house after being pinned down by the enemy.
Well, we salute him, and we salute, as he did, all those who serve.
Yeah, he's a hero.
Yep, for sure. Well, that's a wrap for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.